Welcome to the next session. So today we are going to see a second type of an array, that is two-dimensional array. So if you remember in the last sessions, we first saw the definition of an array and also how an one-dimensional array or any simplest form of an array, we call it as one-dimensional array, how can they be declared, initialized, and how we can access an one-dimensional array. So today we are going to see two-dimensional array. So as we saw, the definition of one-dimensional array said that if an array contains one subscript, such an array is called as one dimension. So since we are dealing with two dimension, as the name itself suggests, it will have two dimension to it. That means it will have two subscripts. Okay. So the basic form of declaring a two-dimensional array will be, like any array, the first thing you should tell data type, because array stores only one type of data, similar type of data, okay, an array name, and you can see there are two subscripts here, okay. Whereas if it was single dimensional array, it used to have only one subscript. That means in two-dimensional array, we are not going to store elements linearly. It's not going to be stored in a linear format, whereas it's going to be stored in the form of rows and columns, okay. So that is why we should have two subscript. One will be mentioning about row size and the other subscript is going to deal with column size, as we are storing element in terms of rows and columns, okay. Whereas in the linear array, that is one dimensional array, we need to have, we used to have only one row and there might be multiple columns, so you need to specify the size of only columns. By default it's one dimension, that will be only one row, whereas here it is having two dimensions, there can be m number of rows and n number of columns. So look at the image. So what is two dimension is nothing but we are going to collect some linear arrays and group them together. So you can see that there are four linear arrays in uh, the left image, and in the right image you can see, and each linear array contains five elements in it, five blocks in it. So how many such blocks are there? There are four such blocks. Each block contains five elements in it. This group together will make an uh, two-dimensional array where four rows and each row having five elements. So this is what is a two-dimensional array structure. Come again. The basic form of declaring two-dimensional array is data type should be mentioned first, then followed by array name, and then you have the subscript. The two subscripts will be there. One will be representing the row size and the other will be representing the column size, because the data in two-dimensional array will be stored in the form of rows and columns, okay. So the declaration example is here. So this, as per this diagram, it has four rows and five columns. So first subscript is going to tell you the size of the rows, that is 4, and the second subscript is going to tell you about the column size, that is 5. Since it is 4 is a size, the rows will start from 0 and goes up to 3, whereas 5 is the size of column, the column will also start from 0 and goes up to 4. So this is what is a basic visualization of two-dimensional array. So this is what I was telling. If size of the array is declared, so rows will be 4 and columns will be 5. Now how many elements can be stored in this particular structure? That is nothing but m cross n elements can be stored, that is x cross y elements can be stored in this particular array. That means 20 elements can be stored, okay. So when it comes to the size of an array, so we have declared array of 4 comma y. So the first we have to calculate how many elements. The elements are not 4 or not 5, whereas if it was linear array, we would have just written int arr of 4. That means it has only 4 elements. Here there are 20 elements. How is it? 4 into 5, that is 20, followed by the size reserved for each block. Size reserved for each block is 4 bytes each, because it is integer. Since it is an integer, then the number of size which will be allocated will be size of int. What is size of int? 4 bytes. And how many rows? 4 rows. And how many columns? 5 columns. That is 20 into 4. That is altogether it reserves 80 bytes to store this particular two-dimensional array structure of 4 cross 5 matrix. How is it 80? 4 into 5 is a number of elements what you can store, and each element takes 4 bytes. That means 20 into 4, that is 80 bytes is reserved for this two-dimensional array as per our example. Okay, so next after once you learn the declaration syntax is here. Okay, then we need to know how do we initialize. So we studied initialization of one-dimensional array using 5 methods. So here we are going to study initialization using 2 methods. So let us see the initialization of two-dimensional array in one by one manner. Okay, so let us take this example, int a of 2 comma 3. What is the meaning of this? That means a of 2 means the first size represent row size. How many rows will be there for your two-dimensional array? 2 rows. If there is 2 rows, the row index starts from 0. So look at the example in this image. Number of rows are 2 because it has been declared as 2. So index of rows starts from 0 and the second index will be 1. And similarly, how many columns are there? There are 3 columns. So the index starts from, column index also starts from 0, but it goes up to 2. Now, see, we have initialized few values inside this. So as I said, since it's a matrix of 2 cross 3, the total number which can be stored in that will be 6 elements can be stored. So we have initialized how many numbers? 6 elements has been stored. As we saw in the one-dimensional array, you can't have 7th element because you can't have number of elements beyond the size. So make sure that, but you can have lesser, okay, but cannot have more than the allocated size. So since 6 elements can be stored in this, I have initialized it to 6. Okay, but make sure that you won't exceed the size. So what happens when you initialize in this fashion is the first element 1 will be stored as a first row first column element. So which is first row first column element? 0 comma 0. In 0 comma 0 it's going to store 1, and the next element will also be stored in first row second column, that is 0th row and first column. So 2 is allocated in 0 comma 1 position. Similarly 3 will be allocated in the space of 0 comma 2. So that ends the first row. Okay, so we have in the first row we have included 3 elements, and then comes the next element will be in the next row. So that is 1 comma 0 you will get 4, 1 comma 1 you get 5, and 1 comma 2 you get 6. And what you need to be very careful about method 1 is, in method 1 we have specified the values linear. Okay, we haven't grouped them. We never said that this element should be in the first row, this element should be in the second row. It automatically by default takes row wise, it stores the element. So once you complete all the elements in the corresponding row, then it goes to the focus will go to the next row to fill the next elements. Okay, so this is how the first method works. But let us see the second method, which we feel that it is the best method. So since 1 comma 2 comma 3 is the elements of 0th index, we group them into one set. Okay, we group the first row element in one set and second row element in the second set. So all this 1 comma 2 comma 3 will be stored in the first row, and 4 comma 5 comma 6 will be stored in the second row. So since if we have 100 rows, rather than writing 100 run numbers, we can group them in each row what are the elements should be present. So in that way, the second method plays as a convenient than the method 1 where we are just writing the numbers. So in case what happens if you don't give the 6th number, but you kept that means till 1 comma 1 you have 5th number. What happens is the rest of the value will be taken as 0. So that means 1 comma 2 automatically will filled by 6 0. Okay, so this we saw in the last one-dimensional array also. If you don't give, if you give lesser number of content than the size of an array, the rest of the elements of the array will be filled by 0. The same concept will be applied even in two-dimensional array. Now, as we saw how to access one-dimensional array, anything what we access in an array is via their index. Here in this case, we have to access 2 index. Okay, it's not 1 index, we need to access 2 index. So using row index and column index, we can access two-dimensional array because the number is not stored only row wise, it's stored row and column wise. So if in case we can access elements stored in first row, what is the first row? First row is 0th row, and second column. In second column, what you have? 0th row, and second column you have the element as 2. If you need to access them, then you can access using two subscripts. The array name is A and the first row index and next the column index. If you want to access 2 as a number, you have to go to 0th row and first column. Okay. So this is how we can access elements in two-dimensional array. And next, let us see how to print one-dimensional array and how to print two-dimensional array. As you all know, when it comes to one-dimensional array, it's a single or a linear structure. So let us assume that we have declared 8 int a of 5 is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will all be stored in, all these 5 elements will be in the single row. So we want the help of only one for loop because it's storing in row wise in a different columns, but only one row are there. So we start the row by 0 and it goes up to less than 4, that is less than 5. So it will access 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this is how one single for loop is enough for one dimensional array because you are accessing by it by only one subscript, that is a of I. Whereas when it comes to two dimensional array, we require the help of two subscripts. That means you want one for loop to handle with rows and the other for loop to handle with columns. Okay, so you can print a of row index and column index, whereas in one dimensional array you have specified only row index. This is a very important thing. So first a of I of j, that is a of 0 comma 0. So this entire 1 comma 2 comma 3 is treated as 0. In that the 0 comma 0 element is 1 and 0 comma 1 element is 2 and 0 comma 2 element is 3, so on for the first element of that particular row, that is the first row elements also. Okay, so why do we require two rows? We require one row for one for loop for rows and one for loop for columns. Now coming to this traces of this program, if I need to access them one by one in two-dimensional array, so you need two loops, inner loop and outer loop. So outer loop is going to control rows. So first you will enter into a row and finish all the columns of the row, and then only you will be shifting your focus to the next row. So that reason we require two for loops, one for row manipulation and one for column manipulation. So first when it begins, I value will be initialized to 0. So if you can see the traces in the right side, I is equal to 0, and then the loop starts. Then I is it 0 is less than 2? Yes, it's true. If it is true, it will go to the next statement. Next statement is also a loop where you are checking j is equal to 0. Now j is going to point at the column, so it should go up to 3 because it's 2 cross 3 matrix, j plus plus. So you are printing a of I of j, that is I is 0, j is 0. What is a of I of j? A of 0 comma 0. So now I will not be incremented because we have few more columns in the particular row. Now that it moves, j will increment. So that means inner loop, the column loop will execute first. Now j will be 1. So next element what you will be facing is 0 comma 1, that is a of 0 comma 1. That is nothing but it prints 2 in 0 comma 1. Then again j will increment, j becomes 2. Okay, then it prints a of 0 comma 2, then it prints 3. Now we finished all j's, that is all the columns 0, 1, 2, 3 columns has finished. J becomes 4, but 4 is not less than 3 because we had only 3 columns. Okay, after this it goes back to outer loop. In outer loop you have I. Now I is from 0 is shifted to 1. That means we are shifting it to the first loop. Inside the first loop, how many columns you have? 3 columns. Again using the same inner for loop, 3 times the loop will run and print the elements. So this is how you can print the elements of two-dimensional array in C programming. Okay, I hope so. You have understood this concept well. Okay, so next we will meet in the next session where we will be discussing few programs related to sequential arrays, or we will also call that as one-dimensional array or linear array. So let us see how an one-dimensional array, sorry, the programs related to one-dimensional array when we meet for the next session. Thank you.